What's up, guys? I hope everyone's doing good. I haven't shown my face in a while, mainly because I've been bald, because I shaved my head, if you guys must know, because of a bet that if MU ended up hitting 110, I pulled over 25K, I would shave my head. And that's exactly what I did, but I didn't have facial hair. I looked pretty awful. So now everything's kind of grown back. I'm more comfortable showing myself. So that's why I haven't shown my face or anything like that. I've been kind of incognito. But yeah, I want to review this really quickly. A lot of people were kind of thought this was like magic. I don't think it was magical. I just kind of understand like how these things work. And it really started with our SPY trade, right? We talked about this kind of making a three lower low, albeit it wasn't as smooth, but very clear where we had a low here, right? A very incremental low here, and then we had a big low there, right? So three lower low into our gap fill, which was this green line at 576. You guys already know we went long off of this range here, and I closed out a lot of this around 591, right? And I was expecting some kind of distribution off of this spot here, right? Of course, I ended up being wrong on that, and that's okay. But then we ended up pressing out and breaking these these two notable lower highs, right? This was a big confluence here where we broke through both of them, and we ended up kind of pushing up into this Wednesday high at 606. And I noticed right off the bat that the actual leader of these names, right, which was QQQ, right, tech has pretty much led this entire rally or the melt up that we've seen, kind of lagged, right? I mean, it kind of broke above these two spots here, and I thought there was a good opportunity that this could pull back, right? If we take a look at the discrepancy here, this was pulling back. If it was going to pull back down into 602, which was that secondary lower high, whereas it basically was already testing the highs, guys. If you take a look, we're already testing pretty much the all-time highs. QQQ hadn't done that yet, right? So I was thinking that there was an opportunity that this would just be a laggard, right? We already knew Nvidia kind of hadn't already made its move. Apple had caught that sell-off, so maybe Apple was going to catch a bid. Microsoft, Meta, Google, etc., all had kind of good news behind it as well. So I was like, okay, there's an opportunity here that this may lag and this may catch a bid later in the week. So really what I was watching was for this to reject here at 531.24 and potentially just pull back down into this lower high here, right? Make that a support, then press out, maybe make this support, and then kind of rip to the all-time high, similar to what SPY did. Now, we had Trump talking, so this got a little bit volatile, as a lot of you guys know. So I really just wanted to see how pre-market ended up looking. Of course, the next morning, right, we kind of pulled back down into 527.92. So perfect, everything is good to go, everything looks good, we just need to be able to catch some kind of discounted entry. And I noticed right off the bat, right, that we had this pretty simple previous day low right here, right here. So this is what I was kind of using as like a break above and hold kind of gauge. Like if we push above that, we pull back to that. I said that weird, but I'll look for that as kind of like my entry point, and then I'll risk 527.92 or maybe take ads down into that. And I did take one DTE, right? I usually I haven't traded one DTE in a while. But right off the bat, we end up pressing, getting a 15-minute candle close above our 529.26. This is where I took entry, and I was going to make my risk the or below, right, which was right around here. The bottom of the contract was 1.267, and that's a notorious level because that ended up being the low for the entire day. And it got pretty damn close to breaking it on this 15-minute candle here. But it printed a hammer. It closed back above 529.26. I should have taken some ads, to be completely honest. It is what it is, though, right? But that ended up being the bottom of those contracts. I said I was going to stop if it hit those, but I noticed that the actual chart, which is here, did not make a new low, right? It kind of stopped a little bit above that, whereas the options chart itself actually made a new low and it stopped there. So a little small discrepancy there that I noticed. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stay in until the actual chart makes a low. Now we got a couple closes back above 529.26, and we ended up getting a really nice third or fourth candle close above that spot there, and we got a big squeeze off of this spot. I think this is right when Trump started to talk. So the 1 DTEs ended up doing extremely well. I think they pushed like 25% here on this pop here, just a little bit back above the highs. We got like 25 to 30%, but you guys can notice each new high was getting faded with a long upper wick. It just got really, really volatile. So in the back of my mind, I'm like instantly, okay, I want to get some kind of like longer dated exposure. And we've talked about this, right? With these distribution ranges, it's very important to understand that a lot of the times they set up something like this, right? I mean, the very, very simple horizontal high, horizontal low, and what they'll do is they'll chop back and forth, right? They'll chop back and forth, chop back and forth. One of them, we might get a fake break over the top. It'll come back down, create this, come back down, and then have a big fake break over the top. So knowing this, right, I thought we can get some kind of double dip, as I like to say, right, where we can now take calls at the lows, sell them into the highs, and then load puts if we need to for the move back down to the lows. And ultimately, this is a distribution, so I want to create some kind of position mainly off here, which is our up thrust, and then a position off the UTAD if it presents itself. So I kind of figured we'd set up the kind of distribution range off of these two lower highs, right? Remember, the one is here at 527, the other one's here at 531. So I was thinking maybe get those cheap calls that I've been talking about, how they're severely underpriced considering, if we look into June, if we look at like maybe 20, 30 points off of the current all-time high, they're very, very, very cheap. So I thought we can maybe grab those, and of course, you guys kind of get what I did. I grabbed a 1DTE, but I was like, okay, I need to get some kind of longer dated exposure if we can get some kind of pullback, right, that gives me a discounted entry. So that's what I was really looking for. And we kind of got that here, right? We had another incremental higher high, right? Each new high on these candle wicks here was pretty small, so I was a little bit hesitant, but it pulled back down into 529.26. I got stopped on my 1DTE, which I should have added. Kind of long story short, I could have kept some pretty crazy exposure there, because like I said, the low of that was 1.26, and it never even got close to this. I think even here, guys, when it pulled back down, right, the contracts were still at 1.26 because the volatility was so high. I could have added at my same exact entry with it still being higher than 529.26, which is this low. And I was targeting kind of the gap fill up here, which the contracts were like 2.8 or something like that. So I could have gotten 100% on like damn near 60 contracts because I wouldn't have closed. I kept telling everybody all day, hold the 531, hold the 532, we'll be fine. And it was fine, right? I mean, realistically, I think just the volatility from Trump having that presser really, I don't know if it scared me, but I wanted to take profits a lot sooner. But thank God, because I got longer dated exposure once it pulled back here. And then from here, right, I'm always kind of looking at like a 618, especially if we get like a large extension. And we, once again, got a small incremental high. So naturally, what I'm starting to do is I'm grabbing from here, and I'm basically grabbing each new high and kind of pulling the 618 and getting a feel where that 618 would be. We ended up kind of pressing up even higher once again, right? And then from here, I think we ended up getting a big move down, right? If I'm not wrong. Yeah, we started to kind of pull back, we pulled back, and we finally got a pullback here, back into the 618, right? Which, mind you, keep in mind that you can extend this to each new high until you find a top. So high was 531. It ends up pulling back, and we get a long notable wick off of 529.42, and our discounted, I guess, like our median for that would be 529.73. But all in all, it retests the 618 at 529.42. We get like a structural retest of the previous day low, and JC Bravo and a couple other people in the Discord were like, hey, this looks really good. So I alerted that I ended up taking the longer dated position, which was for January 31st. And we're looking for this to make a new high, right? Very, very simple. Looking for a big pop to get into that 532 level. Remember, this is actually up here. That's what we're looking for, which is the previous day close, right? So that's the gap down that we're looking for. And then risk was pretty simple. It's now 529.26. Now that we have a potential higher low and our discount at 618, there's no need to really risk down here, right? So very, very simple trade now. Ended up going long off of that. We got a really nice immediate reaction, another like nice secondary follow-up candle, and we just kept pressing and pressing. And when you finally get this test here, right, and it gives you that shooting star, it's important to see the volume. Volume wasn't that extreme, right? If you saw some kind of higher volume like this, you would expect at least to get back underneath the previous close and kind of give you a pullback. And even at that, guys, it's important to understand you could get, and I mentioned this in chat, you could get some kind of higher low here again, right? And then it can keep going. So it's important not to panic once you end up seeing something like that. And of course, candle stayed strong. Even though we got a shooting star like that, we made a new high, stayed strong still. We kind of got our higher low in this general range, right? You got to think about this, right? It did come down, but it's still higher than this. So no need to stop out. kind of got like a little bit of a tweezer bottom there, and then it started to grind back up again, and it kept grinding and grinding and grinding, and then towards the close, right, it got that squeeze out. Very, very nice trade. I should have held this because it went even further than what I expected. Like I said, those contracts went to about 2.8. I had 60 contracts for the 1DT, and I had about 15 of the what was it, 4DT or 6DT, whatever it was, maybe even 7. Yeah, I mean, I got like a 30% gain on the longer dated, and then for the shorter dated, like I said, I got stopped out on the pullback. It was either here or here. I think it was this one right here, this hammer. Those would have been almost 130-40% with 60 cons. So that definitely hurt. But that was the basis of that trade, right? And kind of understanding, as I said before, when these things start to do this, they really build out a range, right? When they start to distribute. Today, you guys can see we kind of sold off of the highs. And what do we end up doing, right? Very interesting. We closed back in this little box, right? Same thing with SPY. If we kind of zoom this back out, SPY had its all-time high, like right around here, right? And it ended up closing back underneath, right? So we're still in this little zone. And if I switch charts really quickly, I think I still have it drawn. Let me double check. I might have it drawn. I do. I have not changed this. So kind of the same thing, right? Maybe it's a little bit higher than what I thought, but I still think that we chop and create a distribution zone in the spot where the lows are accumulated on low volume, but they're collecting a lot of inventory. They're offloading it at the highs, they're rebidding the lows, and they just keep doing that, right? Until they can get enough of the inventory kind of sold off in the supply zone. We have a big drop, which is usually a news catalyst day. I think this looks exactly like an up thrust now. I thought this was the UTAD, but it looks like we're in like preliminary distribution. So buy climax here, kind of the first distribution signs here. This looks like our test, or not our test, I'm sorry, our up thrust, right? And then we could get a big drop down into 582, another massive rally back that's even higher than this that ends up being our UTAD, and then we get our final phase distribution down into like 560. Kind of what I'm looking at. But knowing that, like I said, you can wash trades, right? I talk about this all the time, and I still have my old lines drawn too. Get rid of these, get rid of this, right? This is all the stuff that I had. You guys saw I had a different layout. This is my layout I used to trade it with. Now we're right back in this box. This is exactly what I thought would happen. So pretty cool trade there. Let's jump into NVIDIA now really quickly. I took that today actually, so that was a very interesting one. I know Joe, well, there's a couple of things with this one, right? We've been talking about this. You know, the first zone that I was thinking could be a short, which was our like first LPS potential, LPSY that is, was like right here, right? Remember, we ended up kind of bouncing off of like 130. I was thinking we could push up into this spot here, which is from like 138 to 140, and then sell down, right? And then kind of create the LPSY, and then continued to get like your test down here. Or I'm sorry, this would be your test, and this would be your LPSY, but that's what I was thinking would happen. Remember, we got a pretty nasty candle on the 16th, but we kept grinding higher. And then the other spot that I was looking at, which is the one that ultimately ended up being the spot, was here, right? It was in this imbalance candle that was from our NWOG on January 7th. That was basically where it was. It was literally the top of that today, right? And then it sold back down all the way to top of the daily gap. The gap still hasn't filled at 140, but now we have a footprint candle, right, which is exactly what I was looking for. Only reason I didn't short the top today is like I just didn't want to be wrong. I would rather see a footprint candle and make sure that I'm absolutely certain that this is the distribution that we're looking for, and that there's major sellers here, and that I can catch a continuation, right? And that's all I really cared about. But I did have to spice it up a little bit, and this is where I added next week's Friday contracts, and we got a really crazy gain on those. Those were really nice. I had about 27 contracts on that one, and then I also started longer dated, right? I'll touch on that in a minute, but now that we kind of sold off of our spot, if I kind of re-add all our stuff back here, right, we're just looking for this to potentially pop back up off of this gap here, which I'll mark too. A lot of things I have to mark, my God. We're looking for this to break down, fill this gap, retest the progression gap, fail, and then start to kind of trend down, right? That's what we're looking for. Now, Let's jump into this trade. I feel like this was pretty simple. This is something I've been watching for a while. It just kind of was up based off those last two spots. Shout out to Joe in the chat. He kind of was talking about the basically the bidders at this spot here from Wednesday and then Thursday. They were bidding, right? And as they were bidding, they were spoofing, meaning they were kind of pulling back the orders or taking back the orders entirely. And we kept seeing sellers press it down, right, and kind of baiting sellers, or I'm sorry, buyers to keep trying to bid higher, and they were getting that absorption effect, right? So eventually what you're going to see is that floor fall out, right? Because it seems like there's a ton of buyers that are supporting it, but if, let's say there's 15,000 and you're going to buy with those other 15,000 people and they spoof it and it's only 7, right? That 7 is going to get absorbed by all those sellers and it quickly turns to 2,500 buyers, right? And then let's say they spoof it again and it looks like there's 10,000 buyers. You're going to go, okay, I'm going to buy this again, and it comes down and they spoof and they pull back their orders and there's only 500. It's going to fall through very, very quickly. And that's what I noted down here. Right as we kind of broke down, we gave like a 2-bar retest at 144.51. I primarily traded this on the 5-minute, but you guys can see, right, we broke down, we ended up kind of popping here, and we had a really, really weak, like lower high, bear flag, whatever you guys want to call it, off of that 144.47. So I went short right in here, and then we instantly got a move, right? We ended up kind of getting a 1 week expiration where we basically flushed all the way to the lows here at 141. Those ended up going about 80-90%. I was at the gym for the last portion of that, so I just kind of closed them out a little bit early. I still think we could gap down. And then the longer dated, right, were very nice as well. We went about 12% on these. So I still plan on holding those, and I plan on adding on any pops here. But a really nice little trade here, right? I think we're right on the distribution. This looks fantastic as long as we get follow through, right? And with the longer dated stuff, we can essentially risk this as our like lower high, or as our, kind of distribution spot, right? This is literally a picture perfect spot considering the volume. So it shouldn't get back up to that, and anything from here should be considered smaller time frame lower highs, right? So that's really what I'm looking at. What else did I have? I was going to pause, but I just went straight through that. Oh yeah, other good one here, PDD. No, I didn't trade PDD. I traded JD. I should have taken more size on this one, but you guys got to remember, usually a lot of the stuff that's happening. So remember last time during the BOJ, they had no hint of them hiking rates. The expectation was either a pause or a potential cut because they were getting stimulus checks. Everyone thought they were going to kind of ease things, and then Bank of Japan, boom, ends up kind of unexpectedly releasing a 0.25 hike. That was unexpected. Basically, the carry trade from the yen ended up happening. Right, a lot of people were kind of caught off sides with that, and we ended up seeing Bank of Japan go completely underwater. U.S. markets weren't prepared for it either, so everything kind of crashed literally within 1 day. That was the August 5th event. Also tie in geopolitical stuff. That's when Israel ended up having or being attacked. So a lot of stuff ended up cascading the market during that day. But now, right, a lot of people were a lot more prepared with Bank of Japan. We kind of understood that there was still exposure to the carry trade. People were more properly hedged, so that's not going to happen again, right? So the expectation was a hike to get to that 0.50 BPS. And that's exactly what happened. The result was essentially muted because it had already been priced in, likely during this range here, right, during these sell-offs. So I took some lottos on this one. I should have taken more than 5. I wish I had taken like 20 or 30 because contracts were only 10 cents, right, $10 per. So I spent about, $50. And we ended up just getting a really nice setup, man. I have no other way to really talk about this. This was our progression gap. Right, so this big gap up here, we ended up obviously slicing through this and filling the gap right here. We ended up popping, somewhat filling this gap up here, right, which was from 41.57 to 44, and we ended up pulling right back to the bottom of the progression gap. Sometimes these fail, but of course we got a pretty good response off of this one, and we popped back above the top of the progression gap. So you now have this as your low. This is now your secondary high or low. So if you kind of view this as ranges, we're kind of incrementally climbing up. And I wouldn't even call this incremental, guys. We got over this pretty quick, right? And this was a very high volume gap up and a volume day, right? And then we pulled back on low volume, as you guys can see, right? So very, very intriguing setup. That's why I really like this trade. I figured that there was a mispricing of the contracts, that a lot of this had already been priced in. There was a lot of fear around BOJ. So I liked the opportunity on this one. So I took calls. we had a pretty good move, right? We technically made a higher high here, closed with a higher high. We ended up opening with a breakout, being above these the kind of this downtrending 2-bar pattern here. 250%, right? Not bad at all. I think I made like $300 or something like that. So I wish I had taken more. I probably should have gone longer dated contracts and got, maybe like had this been a swing. I think this still has a lot more room to go up into 41.57, because you have to think about this. This is a lot like shop and things like that, where this now is being absorbed, where we have absorption here, absorption here, absorption here. If we test it again, we might just get like a high tight flag or something like that. So this has an opportunity to really break out into 44, right? And if you take a look at some of these other names, like Baba looks fantastic, right? Billy looks really good. Billy's a little bit lagging though, right? So that looks good. What else? Haven't taken a look at Neo. Neo's still kind of lagging. Baidu, right? Another big one, if I can type correctly. This name broke out of a really big downtrend. So a lot of names were just really set up. I like JD because it's a little bit cheaper, right? It's only in the 40s. So yeah, thought this was a really good move here to take, and ended up paying out pretty decently for such low risk and low size. Let's talk about the loss, right? The losses here, pretty straightforward, right? I mean, I talked about this. Let's actually do this on my other chart. So I don't mess up anything. Very simple, right? I mean, this is where I took exit of my calls, which ended up doing really well. We knew that distribution has been kind of happening with selling kind of moving up into these ranges. We never really got like a footprint candle, so that's my bad. I probably shouldn't have done anything without a footprint candle. But we were moving into these lower highs here, right? And also kind of moved into this imbalance from like right around here. You guys have to think about that, maybe even here. So I was kind of just looking for this old zone, right? So this is literally what I was looking at. This was our old progression gap from the close, like right here, to the previous gap up, right? So kind of this range. If I can get it to snap, my God. That was what I was looking for. I didn't think we'd get back above that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take my shorts kind of in this general range here, and I'll mark this out with like red so you guys can kind of see what I was looking at. Boom. That's what I was looking for. Right, and we got like a nice little candle here. I thought this could be like some kind of spinning top. Next day, we ended up breaking above. Very, very simple. I started this a little bit too early. I ended up closing it, and I was like, okay, let's just kind of sit back. Let's wait. NVIDIA, like I said, kind of the same exact thing. Short was taken. Did I type that right? NVIDIA? Okay. Short was taken. I think we took it way before, guys. Because I was up like 30% on this. I think we took it on this day here, or maybe it was this day. But then it reclaimed back above. So I was still green even on this red day here, like by quite a bit. But I added into the trade obviously here, right? We ended up kind of pushing back up into this this initial progression gap. I thought this would be kind of like our test or LPSY. Right, and I added here on this day because I expected continuation. I really didn't care about my average intraday. I've kind of gotten over that and having an ego of like top sniping stuff. So I took it on this day just expecting continuation, and I expected it not to break back above that high. So my stop loss was essentially here, but I did say I was going to flex it to like 140-ish, which was like right here. Next day we end up breaking above, kind of closed above, so I stopped out of that one as well. It's all good, right? Not a big deal, because I had a secondary zone that I was looking to add, which was this this NWOG, and it's not I guess technically it is a progression gap as well, right? And it's progression gap for bears that they're going to try to hold, but it's also tied into a really crazy imbalance candle here from Tuesday the 7th. So really nice opportunity for a secondary add, and I took that as soon as it showed its hand. Same exact thing though. I didn't need to snipe the top. I just wanted to get some kind of confirmation that this was a bearish candle, right? Obviously, we knew very, very early in the day that this was going to be an engulfing of these two bars here. And on top of that, right, I knew volume was going to be extremely high. So I assumed this was our footprint candle. Once again, I kind of started a little bit early, but I liked how it looked, especially once we kind of started to snap underneath the bottom of that progression gap. So that's pretty much it. I think that's all I took this week, really. Coin was another thing that I've just kind of been adding. I honestly, I don't know. I might close this, to be honest. I'm just getting a bad feeling about the market, but we've talked about this 300 level being pretty key, like right here, right? And this is what I was looking for us to base because I thought we could get a pop back above, hold, and then start to make a run for the extreme highs up here. It's looking a little iffy now, guys. I'm not gonna lie. You know, the only other spot would be like right around here, which is our close to our open right here. So this is all kind of like an area of projected support would be the best word, right? And I look for higher lows to be developed here, right? I like to have higher lows within this range. I'll make it white so it looks a little bit cleaner. But I like to have higher lows within this range, and I like to see a break right through the bottom of it, and this becomes support. And ultimately, I like to see this reject, have a high tight flag, so kind of something like this, push up, high tight flag off of that, and then a break through, and then this becomes support, right? So that's kind of how I like to view progress being made throughout these gaps. Today, not the craziest candle, right? I mean, it is like kind of like a shooting star, but you know, it's not the highest volume, so we'll see how this ends up opening on Monday. Crypto's always kind of crazy throughout the weekend. What else do I have? Intel. I did say, let's go back to my other chart. I keep going back and forth. Intel, pretty interesting, right? So we've talked about, you know, how I believe this is an accumulation range. Absolutely. You know, really, I think this is the LPS, to be honest. But I don't know how to time this because it could kind of happen off of these highs, clear rejections off of these daily highs here. So it could pull back down into 2080. This is also the daily gap. So I was looking for some kind of like divergence into this spot. But in all honesty, it could potentially pull all the way back down to like here, right, which is the close, maybe the top of that daily gap. So I'm kind of just eyeballing this one. I didn't add into the, you know, I didn't add into the shares, but I do think this is just a share play if I'm being entirely honest. Don't like the call side just yet. I would like the calls if we're able to jump creek and we can get a move back above here and kind of base that. Then I think we have a straight shot to like 29. But very interesting chart here. Weekly, you know, not super bad, right? It's kind of like obviously a bearish candle, but the volume's pretty low and it's retesting a spot that we like. So, you know, that's just something that I'm currently watching and still holding. If we take a look at LRCX, kind of the same exact thing, guys. I added some pretty good size into this one. I have about 25 contracts. Same exact thing, right? We have kind of like your external low, you have an external high here, and we've really been building a range within a range. We broke out through on harmonic volume through 7960, and we pulled back onto this on divergence, which is really key right before earnings. So, you know, I could have made a mistake. I definitely could have made a mistake adding so many contracts before earnings, but I absolutely love this chart. I trust the monthly, right? The monthly is kind of telling, in my opinion, with the amount of volume, the large lower wicks kind of retesting this old monthly high. Yeah, I think this is the one. I think this thing's going to pop. I really do think it's going to break above 85, right? Kind of press back above this base, and I think it can rally. So, pretty comfortable with my decision on that one. MU, talked about this one multiple times. I'm pretty much just down to, you know, last of what I have for the 125s and the 130s. I don't feel comfortable adding in the midpoint, right? This is the midpoint of this entire range from the green to the red. I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. Right? This could be an LPS as well off of this progression gap. I just don't know, right? And I would rather let this rip, get above 114.80, which is our creek jump, and then I can trade that up into 127. Or, right, if the market ends up being weak, which is kind of what we're projecting, I would like to see it maybe pull down into this gap, maybe 95 again, and then I could rock 105 calls, and maybe earnings is what kind of gets us above. But that's kind of what I'm working with. Yeah, I really don't know what else to kind of go over. I wanted to review everything. I kind of wanted to talk over weekly and daily charts. I really still think, guys, the big money makers, and I've talked about this a lot, are going to be MU, right? I think MU is probably I think this is the best chart, man. I think this is going to pay, especially considering, you know, we've had 11 inside weeks. We kind of broke out of that range for about 2 weeks. Now we're back within those 11 inside weeks, right? So insane compression here. If we have some kind of massive move, right, whether by gap up or you know, we gap up, pull back and rally again, have a good intraday move, these contracts are going to absolutely explode. That's also why I was thinking about getting like 105 calls, because if we end up breaking above 105 and start moving to 127, the delta is going to be at or above 1, right? So those contracts are going to be essentially like having shares. So if you have a 105 call and it ends up pushing to like 130, dude, there's potential to make like $2,500, $3,000 per contract, right? So and that's just gains. So that's a very, very interesting thing that I'm looking at. But I think MU is like the long, right? So if FOMC, they come in kind of dovish, they're going to go ahead and continue to cut rates and kind of bow down to Trump. I think this can have a big move. I think MU is my top priority for the long side, and I'm saving a lot of cash for that. Or if the Fed kind of defies Powell and we see this distribution pattern kind of play out, I only liked SPY, right? But I think NVIDIA is kind of the one now too, and this is absolutely on my watch list. I do think that this thing vomits back down to 129/130. You have to think about the concept of absorption. This has now been essentially absorbed, in my opinion. This has had so many touches and given you so many bounces, and none of those bounces have really availed to a new high. They're kind of fizzling out, and we're seeing sellers overmatch at the highs. So if we get one more push down to 129, I do think that this level cracks. I think that the buyers kind of give up when we see sellers overpower, and then these guys, the buyers at 129, pull their bids back down into this 118 spot, right? So 118 to 116 is what I have. I think this will be, dude, I think this is going to be an insane trade. I think this or SPY would be the short side trade for distribution, roughly 20%. So that would be disgusting if we're able to get that. But that's really it. I just wanted to kind of go over this really quickly, talk to you guys, go face to face, go over the charts and kind of do them fresh, right? I kind of like to do that where I can bring like a reminder to myself, because I like to go into these, not like having my levels already pre-made. I want to figure out why they made them in real time. So I like to go into these fresh charts and kind of do them live with you guys. But that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me. As you guys know, pretty much all my stuff is Wyckoff and VPA. I like to use dark pools. I like to use market structure. I have a pretty good understanding of market dynamics when it comes to secondhand Greeks and these windows built around OPEX. And yeah, pretty much everything is a process of time and price, man. So sometimes the price is working with you, but the timing aspect isn't there. You have to wait, right? You have to wait. Always happy to teach you guys, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to DM me. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Appreciate it. See you guys.